VR treadmills. They sit right near the top of the list when it comes to awesome gadgets that most people can't justify owning. Up until now, they've retailed for anywhere between $1,300 for the most basic consumer version, all the way up to several $1,000s for the high-end business-focused devices that you might see in some VR arcades. Now, I'm sure many of the most dedicated and enthusiastic VR users have eyed them up at some point. I know I have. After all, being able to physically walk or run through your favourite VR games is a pretty massive and unique selling point, but the price has likely been too high for all but a few of those people. That's where Cat VR's new consumer-focused treadmill comes in. This is the C2 Core, the new entry-level product that's launching later this year. Retailing initially during the pre-sale period for $899 and then settling at $999 normally, it's designed to be more affordable while still offering the same robust VR treadmill experience, and it ships to more destinations for 50% less cost than anything that has come before it. Now, $899 or $999 still isn't chump change. I don't think we're yet into the territory of affordable tech. It's still very much a luxury purchase, but it is moving in the right direction and edging ever closer to being something that more VR enthusiasts can experience or own. Earlier this month, Cat VR kindly sent me a C2 Core and told me to give my honest opinions on the device. So that's what I'm here with today. I've been using the Catwalk C2 Core for a few days now, testing it with 4 games initially to formulate my first impressions. Those games are modded Skyrim, Half-Life Alyx, Compound, and Resident Evil 2 with Praydog's VR mod. Now immediately I'm sure you'll agree that Resident Evil 2 is the most exciting of the 4 games I've tested so far because it demonstrates the Catwalk's ability to potentially work with a wide variety of games and modded VR experiences that weren't necessarily built with VR in mind. To keep this initial impressions video short and to the point, I've created a list of pros and cons which accurately sum up how I feel about the experience after my first few days of use. Now don't worry if I don't cover something in this video that you might be curious about, as I've got some more videos lined up to focus on extended gameplay and a test of the standalone capabilities. We'll start on a positive note with the pros. This thing is absolutely solid, which makes sense when you realise it has to support your entire weight whilst you're leaning forward and trusting the device to hold you in place. The build quality is superb and every element of the product feels premium. The price point might still be eye-watering to many in the VR space, but it does justify the cost in premium quality materials and a robust design. Setup is also relatively painless. The treadmill took me around 1 hour to build, including unboxing everything, and it comes with all the tools you'll need for the job. The longest part was actually carrying the heaviest components up the stairs and then waiting for the sensors to charge for the first time. The biggest selling point of a VR treadmill is thankfully one of Catwalk C2 Core's biggest strengths. I don't think I've ever felt quite as immersed in a VR game as I have when using this treadmill. Walking through Whiterun or slowly exploring the RPD with my own 2 feet is an experience unlike anything else in gaming, albeit one that takes some getting used to and one that's much more exhausting than it may appear, especially in these warmer summer months. Walking on the C2 Core feels a little strange at first. It's more akin to ice skating or rollerblading than actual walking, but once you lean into it and when you've tuned a few settings to get it working perfectly, the feeling is incredible. It's also a fantastic way to beat motion sickness, as my wife can attest. She has always struggled with any VR game that uses smooth locomotion. The second she starts moving, she feels unwell. However, with the Catwalk, she was able to traverse through Skyrim, chopping down innocent bystanders with no motion sickness whatsoever. It's an expensive solution to this problem, but a solution nonetheless. Stealth fitness is my favourite kind of fitness. I'm someone who has never found any joy in going to a gym, and getting me to work out in any capacity is a struggle. If, however, you can gamify that experience, then I'm all in. It's why I've been playing Beat Saber and Les Mills almost daily in these last few months. It doesn't feel like exercise when I'm chasing high scores or slicing blocks in time with the beat, and the experience of using the Catwalk is a similar kind of sneaky gamified fitness. After 2 hours of recording the footage for today's video, I worked up the most impressive sweat I've ever experienced playing VR. The constant walking motion, and sometimes running, paired with the general exertion and movement of a VR game, is a winning combination for those looking for a fun workout. A few quests in Skyrim and you'll be burning calories like you wouldn't believe. The C2 core works with all the games you would expect it to. The Blade and Sorceries, the Half-Life Alyxes, the Pavlovs, but it also works with things like Resident Evil 2 VR. This is primarily due to the fact that the incredible VR mod, which works for Resident Evil 2, 3, 7 and Village, has full motion control support, and the Catwalk Gateway software allows you to add games and configure their settings even if they aren't native VR games. This is an area that I need to do more research into, but setting the treadmill up to work with Resident Evil 2 simply by telling the Catwalk software which touch controller I use to move and how I input that movement, the joystick on my left controller, it was able to allow me to walk instead of using the modded motion control locomotion. This seriously excites me. I immediately need to play through all the Resident Evil games this way and then branch out to other possible modded VR experiences. Compatibility of the C2 core is very impressive when you take into account the Steam VR library, Oculus PC library, standalone Quest library, and potentially a whole host of modded VR experiences. Then that's a lot of games you can start walking around in, and you can do so with all the major VR headsets available today in wired and wireless setups. The C2 core also comes with a fairly basic but much appreciated pack of equipment for setting up an overhead pulley system for wired VR users. It's not the most robust system, but it will get the job done. One loop is affixed to the ceiling and the other to the wall nearest to your play space. When the cable is run through here, you won't have to worry about it getting tangled as you spin around during play sessions. However, in my experience, using a wireless VR solution is far more enjoyable. I've been playing using virtual desktop and it works flawlessly. However, this will depend heavily on your network environment. All the settings within the Cat VR Gateway software are completely adjustable, and you can make these adjustments on the fly whilst in VR. Things like the dead zone, accuracy, sprint modes, jump detection, and even a cruise mode, which moves you around in the virtual world with far simpler feet movements for those who don't quite feel ready to walk or run on the treadmill, can all be toggled on and adapted whenever you see fit. It all feels modular and can be tailored to create the kind of experience each user may want. You can even create and save presets for specific games or adjust all the settings on a global level. It's not the cleanest piece of software I've ever used, but it does the job and it's easy to get to grips with quickly. It can't all be good, however. These are the negative aspects or cons that I've picked up on so far. When my C2 core delivery turned up, the man dropping it off simply said, "I have a pallet for you," and then I had to help him carry said wooden pallet into my back garden. From that point onwards, I was on my own. This thing is big and you will need a decent chunk of space to build it, store it, and of course, use it. In my office, it takes up around 15% of the room when it's not in use. When I'm using it, that percentage is more like 40% due to the extra room you need to give yourself for normal VR actions whilst spinning around on the treadmill, sword fighting, reaching, punching, shooting, etc. From my experience, American houses seem to be much bigger than the houses here in the UK, so if you live on this side of the pond like me and you're a little tight on space, it'll be worth considering where you'll use this and where you'll store it, because breaking it down between uses won't be an easy or quick task. This is something I stupidly did not consider. Using this treadmill is very noisy. I'd actually planned to do a live stream with the Catwalk C2 core, but I need to run some more recording tests before I attempt anything like that due to just how loud it is each time you slide your feet across the base of the unit. Now, I'm confident the noise will be picked up by my wireless mod mic and make audio for gameplay videos a bit of a mess, but more extensive testing is required here. Either way, your neighbours and those you live with will definitely hear you sliding around when you choose to use the catwalk. Another no-brainer here given the job it needs to perform, but the C2 core is a heavy beast. Moving it around any further than sliding it slightly for minor adjustments is a two-person job, so keep that in mind when thinking about its permanent home. The base unit is incredibly weighty. I carried it up the stairs before it was built, but now with the support structure and everything else attached, I'd have no hope of moving this around the house on my own. Out of the box, the C2 Core is a very cool experience, but without any fine-tuning, which will likely need to be done on a case-by-case, game-by-game basis, it can at times feel a little inaccurate or keep you moving when you've come to a complete stop. It's been most noticeable for me in Compound and Half-Life Alyx so far. Every now and then my character will walk a few additional steps when I've come to a halt. This means I often slide past an item I was trying to grab or go face first into a door I was attempting to open. There's definitely a learning curve here that will take time. Making small movements and adjustments to position yourself in just the right location in game is quite hard, and personally I find myself still using the right stick on my touch controllers to turn in game when I could simply spin around on the treadmill. However, I'm sure with time I'll kick this habit as I get more accustomed to spinning on the spot and making those small adjustments. VR is already a medium that suffers from a lot of setup, and it's rarely a quick job to jump into a game and get going. I theorise it's actually one of the reasons why people don't stick around in VR for long. Hopping into a game just isn't as quick and simple as it should be. With standalone headsets it's much better than it's ever been, but PC VR can still be a little bit rough. And with the C2 Core, that experience is now even longer. You need to start the software on PC, plug the treadmill in, wake up the treadmill, wake up the shoes, put on the shoes, make sure the non-slip feature is engaged, strap yourself into the treadmill, switch on your VR headset and start up Steam VR. Now you have to make sure you do this whilst on the treadmill because this needs to be your floor level and not the actual floor. Switch off the non-slip feature on the shoes, load into the game, make sure smooth locomotion and smooth turn are switched on, calibrate the treadmill using the in-game VR menu, and then start playing. However, you'll then likely need to make a few small adjustments to the settings overall before it feels just right. This piece of equipment is fantastic, but it really will appeal only to the most dedicated VR users, which brings me to the final potential con. This is probably the biggest question in everyone's mind. How often will you actually use this? Is it a gimmick, and will you get enough use to justify the cost? I'm enamored with the experience of playing VR games this way. It's immediately liberating, and it feels like the next logical step for those who want to be as immersed as possible in these digital worlds. After all, I don't have the space or the VR headset with a big enough boundary to physically walk the actual distance of Skyrim, but the Catwalk C2 Core will allow me to do that without moving from a fixed spot. It's an amazing thing. But how often will I actually use it? How often will I want to apply the physical exertion required to play a VR game this way? Once a week? Once a month? It's a question that everyone will have to find their own answer for. This is a gadget that falls firmly into the "it's very cool, but I don't need it" category for the majority of people, especially as the price point still sits close to $1,000. The tech here is incredibly impressive for the money, considering past treadmills have retailed for between $1,300 and $1,500. This is an amazing step in the right direction if Cat VR want to make these more viable for the average consumer. However, their biggest battle is justifying that purchase to said customers. Even for the amazing pre-sale price of $899, the C2 Core is still a purchase that feels like a fun gimmick for the majority of VR users. It's something that most will adore, but I would guess rarely use. However, time will tell. Perhaps I'm wrong here. Maybe the C2 Core will be the only way I play VR games going forward. But I think it's much more likely that I'll break this out occasionally for fitness, the odd VR video experiment, and as something to show friends when they come over. And it takes up a lot of damn space to be used so intermittently.